If your words shake when you speak, your life will tremble when tested. You weren't born to whisper your truth. You weren't built to shrink in rooms meant to expand your purpose. So why do you let your voice betray your strength? Today, I will show you how to command a room, not by shouting, but by becoming immovable inside. Stay till the end, not just to speak louder, but to live louder. Your voice is only ever a reflection of what your mind believes. If your thoughts are uncertain, scattered, or filled with doubt, no matter how polished your words are, they will carry the tremble of your hesitation. Your energy arrives before your language does. When the mind is cluttered, the mouth stutters, because clarity cannot flow from chaos. Assertiveness therefore begins long before your lips move. It starts in silence. It starts with mastery over the internal world. You cannot speak powerfully until you think powerfully. This is a truth few are willing to face because it demands more than technique. It demands discipline. You must train your mind the way a warrior sharpens his blade. Because when your thoughts are sharp, your words do not need to be loud. They cut through the noise on their own. Too many people try to learn confidence by memorizing phrases or rehearsing postures, thinking that if they copy the language of power, they will gain power itself. But real assertiveness doesn't come from external mimicry. It comes from internal authority. When your mind is centered, when your purpose is known to you, when your boundaries are clear within, your words stop asking for permission. You do not beg to be heard. You speak because it is necessary, not because you fear being ignored. This shift in intention changes everything. Most people talk to be liked. Few speak to be true. And that difference is where the transformation lies. A mind trained to seek validation will always speak weakly. It will soften, dilute, and compromise its truth. But a mind that is aligned with its center no longer cares for applause. It speaks to stay aligned with itself. That is where real power begins. And this alignment is not something you stumble upon. It is forged through solitude, through reflection, through discipline. If you want to speak like someone who knows their value, then you must first know your value when no one is watching. You must sit with yourself in the quiet and ask, what do I really think? What do I truly believe? What is my line? And when is it crossed? These answers do not come from reading books or watching videos. They rise when the noise stops. They appear when you stop consuming the thoughts of others and begin listening to your own. Once you are clear on what you stand for, the way you speak changes. You no longer hesitate. You no longer wrap your truth in layers of hesitation. You speak not to dominate, but to express what is real. You speak not to control, but to remain in control of yourself. When you are internally disciplined, your communication becomes effortless because you're no longer negotiating your worth every time you open your mouth. Your words become an extension of your calm. Your speech reflects your inner stillness. It does not mean you speak slowly or that your tone becomes robotic. It means that every word is grounded. It comes from a place inside you that is immovable, and people feel that. They may not understand why they are drawn to listen, but they are. Because presence is always louder than performance. A centered mind speaks fewer words, but they carry more meaning. They do not aim to impress, they aim to land. This is why all powerful speakers, whether knowingly or not, have mastered the art of inner clarity. Their thoughts do not sabotage their speech. Their emotions do not hijack their voice. They speak as a reflection of their internal structure. So if your voice is soft, shaky, uncertain, don't just fix the voice. Fix the foundation, fix the thoughts, bring order to the chaos within. The mouth only obeys what the mind believes. If you want to sound unshakable, become unshakable where no one can see. Only then will your voice carry the gravity of truth rather than the noise of confusion. Before a single word escapes your mouth, your body has already made the first statement. Long before your message reaches someone's ears, your posture has already told them whether or not to take you seriously. This is the truth most overlook. Presence precedes speech. If you enter a space with a collapsed frame, eyes darting, shoulders hunched, and feet unsure, no amount of carefully chosen words can compensate for what your body has already confessed. Uncertainty, self-doubt, and inner instability. Assertiveness doesn't begin in your vocabulary. It begins in your spine. The way you stand reveals how much you believe in yourself. Your posture is not a decoration. It is an announcement. Every inch of your frame communicates whether you're hiding or you're here, and the world treats you according to what your body declares before your mouth moves. We've been trained to live from the neck up, as if our words alone hold the power to change how we are perceived. But in reality, it is the alignment of body and mind that creates true impact. If your posture contradicts your message, people will trust the body, not the words. That's how we are wired. The subconscious reads posture faster than it processes speech. And so, if you speak of confidence with slouched shoulders and a bent back, the message gets lost in translation. If you try to set a boundary but your stance looks apologetic, the boundary will be ignored. If you assert your needs while shrinking your frame, people will feel the contradiction and treat you according to the weakest signal you sent. This is why standing like you mean it is not a matter of appearance. It is a matter of alignment. A strong posture is not arrogance, it is honesty. It says, I take up space because I exist. I hold myself up because I value what I carry. Standing powerfully doesn't require being physically tall or muscular. It requires being fully present in your body, grounded, rooted, still. Your feet must feel the floor beneath them. Your chest must be open, not caved. Your shoulders must roll back, not forward in submission. Your gaze must be steady, not searching for approval. All of this creates a silent signal to yourself and to the world. I belong here. When your body expresses that without needing to be loud, it trains your voice to follow. You no longer need to force confidence into your words because it is already expressed through how you hold yourself. When the body leads with strength, the voice doesn't have to carry all the weight. Too often, people try to speak powerfully while standing like they're ready to flee. They don't realize that their posture is signaling the exact opposite of what they're trying to say. You can't deliver a powerful message from a collapsing frame. The body must rise to meet the intensity of your truth. This is why ancient warriors trained their posture as seriously as their speech. They understood that strength isn't something you announce, it's something you embody. To speak powerfully, your body must become a container strong enough to hold the energy of your message. If the container is weak, the message leaks. But if the frame is strong, even a few words carry immense power. There is a stillness that comes from standing tall, from knowing your structure is intact. It doesn't just affect how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. When you hold your body with dignity, your mind begins to reflect that structure. And when the mind follows, the voice deepens. You stop rushing to fill the air. You stop trying to prove yourself with noise. You understand that posture itself is a form of communication. And when it aligns with truth, it becomes louder than volume, sharper than intellect, and more persuasive than charm. Powerful communication is not built on how much you say, but on how precisely you say it. In a world saturated with noise, the ability to speak directly, without fluff, without apology, without retreat, is a rare kind of strength. It requires more than just vocabulary. It demands clarity of intention. Weak communication hides behind soft language. It is filled with hedging, disclaimers, and self-editing in real time. You hear it in phrases like, I'm not sure, but, or I just think maybe, or sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but. These are not phrases of power. They are verbal habits of those who have learned to dilute their truth out of fear of being too much, too direct, too bold. But assertiveness doesn't live in fear. It lives in precision. When you speak directly, you honor your thoughts. You say what you mean. You stop using words as a shield and begin using them as a blade, sharp, intentional, and clean. This doesn't mean you become rude or aggressive. Direct language is not about hostility, it's about structure. It is not a volume increase, it is a noise reduction. It's stripping away every unnecessary word until what remains is the purest form of truth. Think of the most commanding people you've ever heard. They don't use 10 words when 3 will do. They don't dance around the subject. They walk through it. Their words don't ask for permission to exist. They arrive already justified. This is the power of speaking with directness. It does not over-explain or beg for acceptance. It declares, it informs, it draws a boundary without drama. It communicates confidence without effort. And the irony is, most people think they are protecting others by softening their language. They think they are being polite, considerate, gentle. But in truth, when you muddy your message to avoid discomfort, you are not being kind. You are being unclear. And unclear communication leads to misunderstanding, resentment, and misalignment. When you speak directly, you respect both yourself and the person you're speaking to. You eliminate confusion. You give the other person a chance to respond to the truth, not to your performance. Directness is the language of adults. It is how boundaries are respected, agreements are honored, and expectations are set. When you master it, you no longer leave your worth up for interpretation. But direct language doesn't come naturally to those who were raised in environments where speaking your truth led to punishment or rejection. For many, soft language became a survival tool. You learned to tiptoe, to sugarcoat, to disguise your needs in politeness because you feared what might happen if you simply said what was true. But survival language has no place in a powerful life. If you want to grow beyond your conditioning, you must relearn how to express yourself without shrinking. This means paying attention to the words you use, especially the unnecessary ones. Every time you use just, ask yourself if it belongs. Every time you preface a sentence with, "I'm sorry," ask yourself what you're apologizing for. These words, while small, add up. They become verbal evidence of how little you believe you're allowed to take up space. Directness is not something you fake. It's something you cultivate. It begins with an internal decision. My thoughts are valid. My needs are real. My voice is worth hearing. From there, your language begins to sharpen naturally. You stop wrapping your truth in pillows. You stop inserting softeners to make others comfortable. You begin to speak in a way that reflects the strength of your mind and the clarity of your heart. And people begin to notice, not because you've become louder, but because you've become undeniable. You no longer try to be liked. You aim to be understood. You no longer try to be acceptable. You aim to be authentic. And with each word you speak from this place, you teach the world how to listen to you properly. In the realm of true assertiveness, silence is not an absence, but a deliberate, powerful presence. It is the quiet that follows the strike of your words, the measured pause that allows weight and meaning to settle like sediment in water. When others attempt to fill every gap with needless chatter, you hold back knowing that the spaces between words can create more impact than a barrage of sound. This silence is not a void, it is an active tool that commands attention, drawing listeners into the gravity of your message. Instead of rushing to fill the silence with affirmations or justifications, you allow a moment of stillness to expand, enabling every word you have already said to resonate more deeply. In this space, the listener is invited to reflect, to engage with the truth of your statement rather than being overwhelmed by noise. And in doing so, you transfer power from the speaker to the significance of the pause. The discipline to hold silence is a mark of strength, not weakness, and it is cultivated through the same mindfulness that sharpens any skill. It is about developing the awareness to know when the moment calls for words and when it calls for quiet. When you choose to remain silent, you are not conceding to a lack of ideas or a deficiency in energy. Rather, you are signaling that every syllable has been weighed and measured against the backdrop of necessity. This conscious decision transforms silence into an ally rather than a gap in conversation. It is the same principle that governs nature. The quiet before a storm intensifies the force that follows, and the silence after, like the calm after the tempest, reassures that power is held held in reserve. Through the intentional withholding of speech, you manage your emotional energy and create a space where your statements can carry more deliberate meaning. Embracing silence as a weapon also challenges the conventional notion that talkativeness equals effectiveness. In many environments, chatter and constant communication are mistaken for competence, yet true influence lies in restraint. By choosing silence when appropriate, you allow your words, when finally spoken, to carry the weight of deliberate consideration. This practice demands that you be comfortable with the stillness that might initially feel awkward to the untrained ear. In these quiet moments, you resist the impulse to overcompensate or to fill space with empty assertions. Instead, you demonstrate confidence in your ideas and trust in your capacity to be heard without constant verbal reinforcement. It is within this balance of expressed thought and sacred silence that the full force of your presence is revealed, compelling others to pause and reflect before responding. Silence as a strategic device transforms the dynamics of dialogue by providing room for both self-reflection and mutual understanding. The deliberate gap between speaking and listening becomes a crucible of energy where the impact of your message is not only maintained but magnified. This technique affords you time to gather your thoughts, monitor the reactions of those around you, and assess the energy in the room. In doing so, silence becomes an active participant in the conversation, one that communicates as much as your words ever could. It is the embodiment of controlled confidence. By holding back, you assert that what you intend to say is of such significance that even your silence is a calculated and potent gesture. This approach discourages impulsive reactions and sets the stage for a more thoughtful, intentional interaction where every word that follows is absorbed with heightened attentiveness. By mastering silence, you wield a unique form of power that places you in command of both the rhythm and the outcome of any dialogue. You embody a paradox. In your quiet, you speak volumes, and your restraint draws respect from those who might otherwise be overwhelmed by the ceaseless clamor of ordinary conversation. In this measured stillness, you create an environment where the true substance of your thoughts can shine through without the distortion of excess noise, a technique that not only enhances the clarity of your message, but also reinforces your authority as one who understands that sometimes the most profound communication happens in the space between words. One of the most underestimated expressions of personal power is the ability to say no without explaining yourself. In a world that constantly pressures you to be agreeable, to be available, to be compliant, the act of denying a request or declining an expectation without offering a justification is seen as rebellious, even offensive. But in truth, it is the mark of someone who knows their boundaries and respects their own time, energy, and purpose. Saying no is not about rejection, it's about recognition. It is the moment you recognize your capacity, your limits, your values, and your priorities. And when you say it without rushing to soften the blow, without padding it with guilt or layering it with apologies, you reclaim control over your life in its simplest and most profound form. People often struggle with saying no because they are trained to seek harmony, to avoid conflict, and to please those around them. Somewhere along the way, they were taught that kindness is measured by sacrifice, that love means self-abandonment, and that worthiness is earned by saying yes to everything, even at the cost of your own well-being. But this belief system leads to exhaustion, resentment, and disconnection from the self. When you say yes while your body screams no, you split yourself. And each time you do this, you send a silent message to your nervous system that your needs come last, that your voice doesn't matter, and that boundaries are optional. This is not humility, it is self-erasure. And it's only when you reclaim the right to say no without excuse or apology that you begin to feel the solidity of your own presence again. The instinct to explain your no comes from the fear of judgment. You worry about being seen as selfish, cold, rude, or dismissive. So you offer a trail of justifications. I'm really busy. I wish I could, but it's not the right time. hoping that the other person will approve of your decline if you soften it enough. But here's the truth. Explanations are often invitations for negotiation. When you give a reason, you leave room for someone to challenge it, push back against it, or manipulate it. But when you offer a direct no with calm, collected energy and no added commentary, you close the door with dignity. You show that your decision is not up for debate. You make it clear that your boundary is not a suggestion, it is a fact. This form of assertiveness is not harsh, it is clear, and clarity is often more compassionate than the discomfort of a reluctant yes. When you agree to things you don't truly want, you give others a version of you that is fragmented, fatigued, or fake. That's not service, that's self-abandonment disguised as generosity. True service, true connection starts from a place of wholeness, and you can't be whole if you constantly betray your own needs to avoid disappointing others. No is not the opposite of love. It is a form of self-respect, and in many cases, it is also a deep form of respect for others, because you are choosing honesty over performance. Mastering the unapologetic no requires internal alignment. You must come to a place where your peace matters more than public opinion, where your time is guarded like the treasure it is, and where your integrity is worth more than temporary comfort. When you realize that you don't owe anyone a performance to validate your boundaries, your language changes. You speak more simply. You communicate more directly. You no longer feel the panic rise in your chest when someone makes a request that doesn't serve you. You breathe, you observe, and you respond with a clear, grounded no, not out of spite, but out of self-honor. The strength of your boundary lies not in how much you say, but in how little you need to say. A clean no spoken from calm conviction holds more power than a long-winded excuse shouted from anxiety. And with each time you practice this discipline, you reinforce the message that you are no longer available for a life of over-explanation, overextension, or emotional compromise. True assertiveness is not born from emotional reactivity. It is rooted in stillness. In moments of tension, when your heart pounds and your breath shortens, it becomes dangerously easy to mistake intensity for clarity. But emotion, though powerful, is often volatile and unrefined. When you allow it to dictate your voice, you don't speak from truth, you speak from turbulence. And a turbulent voice may be loud, but it is rarely respected. If you want your words to carry weight, to land without being dismissed, you must learn to still your internal world before you speak. Because when the mind is steady, the message is stable. When the heart is calm, the language becomes clean. Emotional chaos weakens communication by clouding your intent, raising your tone, rushing your pace, and pulling your words into a place of defense or attack. But when you speak from stillness, you no longer react, you respond. Speaking from stillness is not about being emotionless. It is about emotional mastery. It's about creating a space between the stimulus and your voice, a sacred pause where you anchor yourself before expressing what must be said. In that pause, you gather your strength, not by clenching your fists or raising your voice, but by breathing, grounding, observing, and choosing your words with precision. There is a centeredness that comes from this space, and when you speak from there, people feel it. They may not know why your words land so deeply, but they do, because a calm voice in a chaotic world is like still water in the middle of a storm. It commands attention without trying. It becomes the reference point for truth, for direction, for grounded energy in a moment that might otherwise spiral. When you let your emotions drive your speech, you often say more than you need to. You overcompensate, you rush to be understood, you defend, you accuse, you justify, and in doing so, you give away your power. But when you operate from stillness, you realize that you don't need to convince anyone. You only need to express your truth clearly. Stillness removes the need to overpower because it rests in the knowing that presence alone is enough. You are no longer trying to win. You are not seeking validation. You are simply anchored in clarity, and from that foundation, every word becomes deliberate. Even disagreement takes on a different energy when it comes from calm rather than from frustration. Assertiveness does not mean you raise your volume. It means you lower your emotional temperature until only truth remains. Developing this kind of stillness is not easy, especially for those who have been conditioned to express themselves only when they've reached a breaking point. When your voice has always come from anger or desperation, stillness feels unfamiliar, maybe even unnatural. But the power in stillness is that it gives you access to your full intelligence. It allows you to regulate, reflect, and refine before you release your thoughts into the world. And once you experience what it feels like to speak from that place, you won't want to return to reactive communication, because the peace you feel when you own your voice without being controlled by emotion is unmatched. It is a form of liberation. You are no longer a prisoner of your own emotional spikes. You become the observer and the chooser, not the reactor. When you embody stillness, your energy becomes undeniable. You can walk into a room and say less than everyone else, and yet hold the most influence, not because you're performing silence, but because your presence radiates control. Your words come from a place beneath the noise, a place deeper than irritation or pride. You begin to understand that the most powerful language is often the calmest. It's not the scream that shifts the room. It's the quiet authority behind a well-placed word. When you speak from stillness, you are not shrinking, you are sharpening. You are channeling your force through a focused current instead of scattering it through impulsive emotion. And the result is speech that resonates, not because of how forceful it is, but because of how grounded, clear, and necessary it feels. Confidence is often misunderstood as something loud, something public, something performed in front of others. People believe that to be confident, they must prove themselves in rooms full of noise, eyes, expectations. But real confidence is not built under the spotlight. It is forged in silence, in solitude, in the invisible hours where no one is watching. It is earned in the quiet moments when you keep promises to yourself, when you face the discomfort of your own thoughts without distraction, and when you choose to confront your weaknesses without an audience. You don't develop confidence by being praised. You develop it by doing difficult things alone and realizing you can rely on yourself. It is not something gifted to you by external validation. It is something cultivated through inner discipline. And until you learn to be someone you can trust in private, no amount of applause will ever fill the void inside.